Hey, I'm Kendra Winchester. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be telling you about my favorite books of 2017. Actually, I'm going to be telling you about the honorable mentions, because this year I've decided to split it in two videos. The honorable mentions video is actually organized by genre, so I'm going to be telling you about those in no particular order, and then the top 10 will be in order. But I decided to do it in two videos because there were just so many books I wanted to tell you about. Now, I will also say, you might have noticed that the Reading Win Award was announced earlier this year, and I'm not going to include any of those on these lists because I don't really want to play favorites when judging an award, so just go check out the Reading Win Award shortlist. I'll link those down in the description box down below, and I'll link them above my head somewhere. Definitely go check those out. Every single one of those books on the shortlist is definitely a favorite of the year. And especially the winners, Hunger by Roxane Gay and Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. So that being said, I think it's time to talk about some of my favorite books from 2017. So I thought I would start with YA, and my favorite YA book of the year would definitely be Kristen Couture's Jaina Limited. I really did not want to read this book. I didn't think it would be that good. I was really upset that Kristen Couture was writing a choose your own adventure book. I mean, not that it's really any of my business or choice or anything, really, to be honest. But, she's so good at, high fantasy. I was like, why are you changing when you're so good at something? But she wanted to try something different. As a writer, she had a lot of different other interests besides a single genre. And so what she decided to do was do a choose your own adventure book. And each choice is written in a different genre. So the basic setup is that Jane's aunt has recently died, and so Jane goes with a friend to this billionaire island mansion, and there she ends up on this landing of the stairs, and she can choose which other character in the book to follow to try to find out some answers, like who her aunt was. There were some secrets there. Who is this random girl running around the mansion? She seems to be one of these missing people that's been in the newspapers lately. There's this adorable basset hound. Ravi, who is her friend Kieran's brother, seems really attractive, and she kind of wants to follow him. There's also another girl that she also thinks is really attractive, and she wants to follow her. And then there's her friend Kieran, and then the housekeeper, and there's just a lot of different options in there. Well, actually, 5, but to me that seems like a lot. So what she does is she's on that landing, and then you choose which direction you want to go, and then you go to that one. Or you can do what I did, and I just read it straight through. And in fact, Kristen Couture says, well, it really is designed to read it straight through so that you pick up certain pieces in a certain order of all of the different secrets. What I really love about this book is that she does not give you all of the information in one story. So you have to read the entire book to get the complete picture and have all of your questions answered in the book. And I really love that. And she really plays on the idea of different timelines and genre, each choice being written in a different genre. And I just really loved it. And I was just really impressed with what she did. And I just really enjoyed this book. And I know a lot of people really aren't into choose your own adventure, or they were like me and they were like, well, I'm sad you're not writing fantasy for this one. But ultimately, it really was great. I really, really enjoyed this book. And the protagonist, Jane, really loves making umbrellas, and that's throughout the entire book. But I really love how the design on here is like this. And this was just a delightful surprise. I heard this interview with Kristen Couture from the New York Times Book Review podcast, which I will also link down below. You can go check out as she and Pamela Paul talk about the book and how she came to write this book, and I just think it's great. That was a long time on one book. I probably should pick up my pace. Let's see how that goes. So one of my favorite fantasy books of the year would definitely be The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is an amazing book. This is about Neri, and she lives in, 18th century Cairo. And she's a con artist. Now, she does have the powers to understand all languages and speak it, basically like a native. And she also can diagnose people and their illnesses and different things. She basically used those abilities to con people. She's a con artist, so she was doing the seance, and she actually does summon a jinn. What I really love about this is that Chakraborty uses Middle Eastern folklore and mythology. I think the whole elves, orcs, dwarves kind of Western type fantasy is really overdone and just exhausted. It's just so boring at this point. And so what she does is she gives it a fresh look and uses a different country's folklore and mythology. And I just really love what she's done with that. Also, her world building is very well done. She doesn't overwhelm you, and she doesn't overly frustrate you by not telling you stuff like some of other fantasy books I've read this year, and it's just a lot of fun as well. And you know, there's also a lot of depth to this book. You know, when we read books, we want to read books that enrich us and teach us things. And I think this book also is entertaining. So it's entertaining and it can qualify for the escape if if that's what you want. But it has enough depth where you're kind of learning something, or at least reminded about truths about, the world and the universe and different things. And I just thought she had such a great balance. And I was just so delighted by this book, and I cannot wait for the second book to come out. I haven't read a book this much fun in a long time, so it's really great. I read The City of Brass and Jaina Limited really close together. And before I forget, because I keep forgetting to do this because I get just so excited about the books, this one is from Kathy Dawson Books, the Jaina Limited. This is a new imprint actually with the editor, and so Kristen Kishore just moved imprints with her editor. And then City of Brass is from Harper Voyager, and they also publish The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and I think The Prey of Gods. So they really have been doing well this year. Let's do mysteries. So from Mulholland Books, which is an imprint of Little Brown, and my favorite mystery of the year was Bluebird by Attica Locke. And Attica Locke is this amazing writer. She's an African American woman who writes about African American characters in the South. She does an amazing job. So this book is about Darren Matthews, who is a Texas Ranger. You know Walker, Texas Ranger, like with Chuck Norris? Well, he is a black Texas Ranger, and so he goes around Texas. Because Texas is the biggest state in the lower 48, there's just a lot of rural landscape and different things in there, small towns that just don't have a lot of resources, and so they have Texas Rangers go in. So Darren Matthews is a really complex character who loves where he comes from. And what happens is that there's a murder in a small town. A black man from the north who is visiting is murdered, and then a white woman is murdered shortly thereafter, and she's from the town. And so they're like, well, are the murders connected? What happened? And then the wife of the murdered man shows up. So Darren ends up going in and trying to help out without kind of the town knowing, and he's not really supposed to. He's actually suspended. So he's not really supposed to be doing that. And I really love how Attica Locke talks about what it's like to be a African American man from the South and loving the South. And Attica Locke does this as well in The Cutting season. She has a northern character, a northern African American character come in and kind of work as a foil almost to the protagonist who's from the South. And so the person from the North sees the South through different eyes. But then, Darren himself describes like he is part of that culture and that landscape. He says, the Texas dirt runs in his veins, and he loves his home, that it's his home. And so I really think she gives a great viewpoint of what it's like to live in the South and just be so associated with that land and the culture. And I just really love what she did with this book. I think this is being turned into like a TV series or a movie or something. I don't know, but I'm really excited about it. Like, I think she does a great job, and she also writes for TV, so I'm hoping that she'll also be writing for this one as well. So that is really exciting. So if you haven't checked out this mystery, you definitely need to. So I have some books from some small presses that I'm going to talk about here in a second. And there's kind of some overlap, but one of my favorite short story collections from larger presses this year would definitely be What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky. This is from Riverhead, and this is by Lesley, Nneka, Arimah. This is a short story collection that is just phenomenal. Like, I am just blown away by this book. So Lesley, Nneka, Arimah is Nigerian, and she writes this beautiful book that includes stories with a wide range. There's like realist stories that are contemporary, there's stories based on mythology and folklore, there's a near future type story, which is the title story. And I just love what she does. She has really strong female protagonists. If you love Difficult Women by Roxane Gay, where she has all these strong women and there's such a wide range, and she shows off like her skills through the different types of stories she does, then definitely pick up this one. I actually read them back to back, and some of the stories are similar, so similar in theme. I felt like they were almost like writing the collections together. Obviously they weren't, but I just love this collection. And there's so many strong women in this collection. My favorite story might be the title story, which is in the future you have these people who can take on the pain of others, and that's kind of like their job, almost like they're therapists, but they literally like absorb the pain. And then there are these refugees that come through, and this person who's one of those people who absorb the pain, like she kind of like touches the girl and realizes all the pain that's going on, and it just is a great look at suffering, human suffering, and helping others, and how much can we actually do to help others, and their emotional pain and different things, and just what she did with that story was fantastic. So if you haven't read this book or picked it up yet, or even heard of it, which it's been a bit of everywhere, then you'll definitely want to check this one out, because I just keep thinking about it. So the next 4 books are from smaller presses, and I chose these because I just love them. They really don't fit too many categories, but I just love them and I want to talk about them, which I think is a justified reason for talking about more books. So the first book I want to talk about is from Tin House, and that is Rabbit Cake by Annie Hartnett. This book, on the surface, when you finish it, doesn't seem like a lot. It doesn't seem to blow you away, but I will say that this is one of the books that I have thought about more than almost any other book. It just stayed in my mind. And there are other books that are absolutely fantastic. I've assessed, I've researched them and written about them, but this book just has so many memorable moments in it, and it is so funny, but yet so moving because it deals with grief. And this story revolves around a girl named Elvis who lives in the South, and her mom recently sleepwalked into the river and she died. And so she goes to her school's counselor, and the counselor says, well, they say that, recovering from grief, or the stages of grief, takes X amount of time. And so basically you follow Elvis during that time. Elvis's sister eventually decides to break the Guinness Book of World Records of made rabbit cakes. The rabbit cakes that are actually formed and baked in the shape of a rabbit, and then you decorate them. And so that's where the name comes from. But it is just a beautiful book, a funny book, and it handles grief in such a way that I feel that you could give to someone who's grieving, and it wouldn't be too much. It would be meaningful and uplifting, but yet funny all at the same time. And there's just something about this book that is just so heartwarming, and while it may not be the most perfect book I've read this year, it is one that I definitely have one of the biggest emotional attachments to, because it is just that delightful, and I just can't wait to read what Annie Hartnett has next, because this book is just one of those books that I definitely made a personal connection with. So definitely go check out Rabbit Cake by Annie Hartnett. So another book that I really loved, and it's just a delight, is Sorry to Disrupt the Peace by Patty Yumika. This is out from McSweeney's, and this book is about Helen. Helen is a Korean American, and she and her brother, though not biologically related, were adopted from Korea to white parents who live in the Midwest. And when her brother commits suicide, Helen flies from New York back home to go to the funeral. But at the same time, she's not convinced her brother committed suicide. She believes she knew her brother so well and he would never commit suicide. So what on earth is going on? Helen is the most unreliable narrator that I have read, I think, ever, because she uses such language and repetitive language. So she always calls her parents my adoptive father, my adoptive mother. And she uses this repetitive language about her troubled young people, which is where she works in New York. She also talks about where she gets her clothes, and she'll say that so-and-so did this thing because they were upset about X or whatever. And that's not actually true. She's making assumptions, and the way that she interprets the world and then feeds that information to you is often completely and totally wrong. My pile of books just fell over. But I just love Helen. And the characterization is brilliant. There's a moment in this book, which is probably my favorite moment, which is when Helen finds the journal on her brother's computer, and she reads a section which is also in first person, and she reads how her brother sees her, and that's the first time we step out of Helen's head and we view her from the outside, and it's just so well done. I just loved it. This limited first person perspective is just so incredibly beautifully almost perfection. Now I will say, if you don't like Helen, you won't like this book, because the entire thing is from her perspective, and it's kind of repetitive in how she thinks and how some of the obnoxious qualities that she has. And she's kind of gross in a lot of ways, but yeah, I did find it incredibly interesting, and I really enjoyed this book. So these last 2 are also from smaller presses, and this is just I felt like these 2 books, they could be friends. These 2 books are just so similar in a lot of different ways. So the first one is Tender by Sophia Samatar. This is from Small Beer Press. This is Kelly Link's press. She works with it in some way, but this is so for fantasy type work. and tender is just so well done, and it's so diverse and different. So the first story is actually an encyclopedia about ogres. And then another story is this kid writing a report for their, for her teacher, and that she's actually telling the story in this report. Another one, there's one in letters. There's one in like these audio memo type things that this person is creating. She just uses these forms all over the place. And what I love is that these forms are integral to how the story is told. You cannot remove the form from the story, and she just does a great job with that. And I just love her stories. All of these are fantasy or sci-fi inspired related, and Sophia Samatar is Somali, and so she uses her heritage and folklore, and there's even like this like faux history on some like folklore stuff in the book, and I just really love how she's inspired by that fairy tale folklore type feel with a lot of her stories. And everything about this is just, I just loved it, and I don't know why more people aren't talking about it, because it is delightful, and it's similar to a lot of different genres that people love to read, only they're all in just a single book. Last, and certainly not least, is a book that I think we all know and love, and that is The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell, the famous Jen Campbell of BookTube fame. We all have loved this book. I think everyone that I have met who has read this book has really loved it, and for good reason. This book is a beautiful book, and some writers can write well, but they can't tell a good story, and some writers can tell a good story, but they can't write well. But Jen Campbell can do both, and I think she does such a great job. And because Jen is a poet, you can tell that every word in this collection needs to be there. It has been trimmed down to its purest form, and for me, that is what makes great writing. And so I just love reading this. The rhythm in it as well is just beautiful. I think a lot of times, because we read silently to ourselves, that sometimes that beauty of spoken words, spoken storytelling is lost. But not with Jen Campbell's short story collection. These fairy tales a lot of them are inspired. I say fairy tales? They feel like fairy tales. A lot of these stories are inspired by fairy tales and folklore and just different things. So my favorite short story in this collection is called Margaret and Mary at the End of the World, and it's just this beautiful look at this girl and her life, and there's this painting that she's kind of obsessed with, and there's like these flashback moments, and I just love the writing and the storytelling and some of the impressionistic techniques that are in the story, and I think they're all beautiful. And yeah, a lot of the I love this. There's so many different things. I ended up reading this like in 1 or 2 sittings. Like, I know it was in the same day, but I think I stopped to eat or something, and then I ended up Googling random deep sea fish at 2 a.m. and at that moment I knew it was a great short story collection if I kind of was getting obsessed about Googling things. And yeah, we interviewed Jen over on the Reading Women podcast, and she is just a delight to talk to, and learning more about her collection was great. So if you haven't already picked this book up, definitely go check it out. So the last 2 that I have, actually, I almost forgot, are not here. I don't have them in physical form, which is sad. I got them either from the library or online through the library, so but I will add a photo here. So my favorite poetry collection of the year is Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith. And I talked about this in my most recent wrap-up, I think, and I don't think I did him justice, because his poetry is just so incredibly beautiful. Danez Smith is a gay African-American man living with HIV, and so much of his poetry has to do with raising awareness for those who live with HIV, especially African-American men who are more likely to get HIV and AIDS than white gay men. So I found it very interesting how he combines all of that into just a single collection. He also talks about police brutality and like parallels that with his struggle living with HIV and just what it feels like to live with HIV. He has several poems that are just so incredibly meaningful, and I'm going to link down below my favorite poem, which is Dear White America, and watching him perform that poem just gives me chills, and I love it so much. So I'm not going to read any of it to you because, again, I don't have it in front of me, but definitely go check out him performing his poetry. It is absolutely just fantastic. My favorite essay collection of all things was definitely We Are Never Meeting in Real Life by Samantha Irby. So this poetry collection, I must give a disclaimer, is not for everyone. If you don't connect with her humor like right off, just know you probably won't like the entire collection. It also talks a bit, it has a bit too much information about her love life with her wife and when they first met and got together and everything. So also just be aware of that. If that's not your thing, then definitely don't pick it up. But if you're fine with all of those things, I just loved it. I loved it. So Samantha Irby has Crohn's disease, which is an inflammation of the entire gastrointestinal tract, and it often causes diarrhea and a lot of problems. She also struggles with a form of degenerative arthritis, and she's also a self-described fat woman. So she lives her life describing what it's like to live life as herself, as Samantha Irby. And she, in the beginning, she talks about her dating life and about how a lot of guys, like, she'll go on a date and then she'll hook up with this guy, and the guy says, you should be grateful that you could sleep with someone as attractive as I am, because women as fat as you don't get to sleep with men as attractive as I am. And she's like, oh, really? And she also has this really demon-like cat that she really loves, but she describes in such horrible ways, and she basically has almost like imagined scenarios with this cat and what's going on. And but she also is some very real about, she had a really rough childhood. Both her parents were older, so she had to take care of her mom, who also had a form of autoimmune disease, and just all the things in this book is fantastic. There's this one story where she is carpooling with these two guys from college, and she's going home, and they get stuck in traffic, and she has gastrointestinal distress problems, and she ends up having to go to the bathroom on the side of the road. And the way that she describes it, I was laughing so hard I about cried. Like, it's so funny. It's so funny. And I have a similar autoimmune disease, and so I have experienced not quite that, but I feel her pain, that is for sure. And so having, seeing yourself on the page, and all the times I was in college and in a class and having the teacher glare at me because I had to yet again leave to go to the restroom because of inflammatory bowel problems, I just felt like she was my spirit animal in that moment, and she just does a great job. So I love this essay collection. It's funny, it's smart, it's moving, and it says a lot of important things in such a just well done way. She's just a talented woman. And she reads the audiobook. So definitely get the audiobook if that's something that you're interested in. I just think she's just endlessly funny, and I love her. So there you go. So that is all of the books that are on my honorable mentions. Next time I will be back and we'll talk about my favorite books of the year. But yeah, tell me if some of these have made on your favorite list, or if you didn't even know they existed and you're planning on picking them up, or just all the things. I hope you guys are having a great holiday season. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you're having a great Christmas, because I think this is going up on Christmas. Not quite sure. Haven't really planned it all out. But yeah, and I guess that's it for me, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.